Hello, well, the question of the day is this rain going to stop? The answer, of course, is yes, followed by the next question, when? Listen, I've got the sunshine jacket on, that's the best I can do, and tomorrow looks the best bet for some bright periods. This evening, we've got a lot of heavy rain to come in places, particularly over the Pennine areas, and there could even be the odd flash of lightning here and there. So, a miserable evening, cold and really poor. Through the night, these showers will continue in one or two places. The temperatures are incidental. 54 Fahrenheit is 12 Celsius, so who cares about that? Tomorrow morning, we've still got that breeze coming in from the North Sea, so a fair bit of cloud about. Even from the word go, one or two showers. I don't think you're going to see anything like today. It's a much better picture for tomorrow. However, as we go into the afternoon, although most of us will see some sunshine, we'll also have the odd heavy shower about again. Very cool at Bamborough. On the coast, all the way down there is only 13. Friday, much better prospect, lighter winds, a lot more sunshine.
Eight arrested in Sunderland in connection with alleged benefit fraud.
An industrial tribunal hears £1 million compensation claims for redundant Swan Hunter workers.
And just how much would you pay for Gazza's old boxer shorts at auction? Good evening. 8 people were arrested in a series of dawn raids in the Sunderland area today. Northumbria police say it follows a 2-month-long investigation by 20 officers from the CID and the Department of Social Security. It's alleged that stolen benefit books were used to obtain payments amounting to around £7,000.
The 5 men and 3 women were arrested during raids on 9 addresses in Sunderland's Ford and Pennywell estates in the early hours of this morning. The arrests followed 2 months of investigations by 10 officers from Sunderland West CID and 10 from the DSS Fraud Squad in an offensive nicknamed Operation Hooter, apparently due to the size of some of the suspects' noses. The alleged offences have been described by police as a large-scale benefit conspiracy. The benefit books are thought to have been obtained in house burglaries and thefts from cars in and around Sunderland. They had a face value of £14,000. But it's thought that only half that amount was actually drawn on them. Police now say they're continuing their inquiries, but they don't expect any further arrests to be made.
Well, with me now is John Gordon of the Department of Social Security. John Gordon, I know you can't talk about this particular case we've just been featuring, but do you know the extent of benefit fraud in the North East?
So far this year there have been nearly 200 arrests for this kind of offence. Last year we saved £2.5 million because of our investigations into this sort of offence. That's double what we saved last year. It's a serious business being done by gangs rather than one-off opportunists these days.
And is this all part of a determined crackdown on fraudsters?
Oh yes, there's a lot of things that we are doing to try and counteract fraud activities, one of which is to redesign the Social Security benefit order book to make it more difficult to forge and to make it easier for post office staff to pick up the meddled with book.
That's one of the new books. How does that differ from the old books?
Far more difficult to forge. There's watermarks, a much more complicated pattern, and there are various things that would only be noticed by a post office member of staff to alert them to the fact that the book had in fact been tampered with, because you have to tamper with a book before you can cash it.
Now, I know the credit card companies are toying with the idea of actually having a card with a picture of the holder on it. Have you not considered something like that for benefit payments as well?
We're trying experiments in certain parts of the country along these lines, including the use of barcodes, which is proving very useful, and we will assess the results of that in due time. Also, there is the facility to have your benefit paid into a bank account, so you don't need an order book at all.
Right, but how would barcodes actually work? Can you describe?
It enables the person behind the post office counter to be able to find out certain details about who the proper payee of that order book should be, and that will alert the post office clerk as to whether the person who's presenting the book really matches up with the details shown by the barcode.
Well, for example, it might give the age of the payee on the barcode.
Precisely
perhaps.
that sort of thing. Only at the experimental stage now we're going to look at it.
And just briefly, what sort of sentences can people get for fraud?
For this sort of fraud, it's valuable things are being stolen. It will be years rather than months. That's our usual experience, 2 years, 3 years, because we are talking about lots of money here.
And it's going to be harder for the cheats in future.
Certainly will be. We're doing our best to see that it is.
John Gordon, thank you. Leslie.
A 70-year-old woman who's severely disabled has had her lifeline taken away by burglars just 6 weeks after being widowed. Mary Beard from Salters Lane in Stockton wasn't at home when the burglars struck sometime over the weekend. Her flat is specially adapted to cope with her disabilities. But even though they knew this, the cold-hearted thieves stole television and video equipment, leaving Mary devastated.
Mary was just 17 at the start of the Second World War, when, as an auxiliary fire officer, she was paralysed from the neck down by a bomb. It had been destined for ICI's Billingham plant, but exploded in Norton High Street. She married just a few years later and has been completely dependent on her husband Bob since then. After his death just 6 weeks ago, Mary has been looked after by her family, and while they took a well-earned rest, she moved briefly into a residential home near Darlington. While she was away, burglars broke into her ground floor flat in Stockton, taking 2 televisions, a video and satellite equipment.
And I've taken the things that was my life, really, now. It's my husband's gone, you know, he's died, and that's it. And I haven't even come to terms with that yet, really. It hasn't really hit me.
And as Mary tries to deal with Bob's death, she says the burglary is a cruel blow.
I only hope that people just realises how it really has hurt, really hurt. To think I went and I've fought through for my country, and to be like this. 100% war disabled, and they've come and done that to me. If I'd have been in the house bed, I couldn't have helped them, could I? I could have, you know, like, couldn't have stopped them.
Mary lives in a very close-knit community where she and her husband were a well-known couple. Because of this, she says she's convinced the burglars will have known her.
I only hope that them people that's watching me just feel how I feel now. That's truthful, I do. Because I really am broken-hearted. Not for the things, it's just the thought of that they've broke into my place and done it to me, and they've known me. People who's done this know me, must know me, and know I'm on my own.
But in spite of all that Mary has gone through in the past few weeks, she's determined to stay at home.
They'll not get me out. I'm still as brave as can be, don't worry, Pet. But I just thought the scoundrels fancy doing that.
Well, let's hope Mary gets her TV and video equipment back. Now, hundreds of former shipyard workers are tonight being told they'll have to wait for a decision over whether they're entitled to compensation for redundancy. A Newcastle Industrial Tribunal today reserved judgment in the case of 432 workers instantly dismissed when Swan Hunter Shipyard was taken into receivership. Unions representing the workers say the receiver broke the law by not notifying them that their contracts would come to an end. They say their members could be entitled to thousands of pounds in compensation.
A few of the redundant workers gathered outside the offices of the Industrial Tribunal this morning. 7 unions representing 432 workers believe they're each entitled to as much as £2,400. Under employment protection law, they should have been given 90 days' notice. The best most of them got was a tap on the shoulder and instant notice to leave.
We will be requesting the tribunal to consider making a protective award. The tribunal has the power to make an award up to 90 days' pay.
If you do get that award, and that's an if at the moment, where will the money come from?
Receivers' funds, if there are any funds available, but alternatively we would expect that the money would then come from the Department of Employment Redundancy Fund.
The workers represent the first batch of redundancies implemented at the end of May, after the yard had been taken into the hands of the receiver. It's the largest case of its type. The implications of any decision made here are enormous. Today, after an all-day sitting, a decision wasn't forthcoming.
I've got no doubt that following disappointment today and not having a decision, I'm fairly confident that we will get the right decision at the end of the day.
Nevertheless, you didn't get any decision today. Are you angry about that?
Well, concerned, yes. But having said that, I do understand it's probably setting a precedent in terms of the Employment Protection Act in conjunction with the EC regulations. And I've got no doubt that the tribunal wants to take some time to reflect on that.
Whatever the eventual decision, this is just the first of a series of appeals. A further 286 employees made redundant on July the 16th will soon be pressing their claims. And the likelihood of yet more redundancies from the stricken shipyard means that the eventual bill for the government could run into millions. The union response to that is that the cost in human terms for 700 workers who've left without a penny has already been higher.
Police are hunting 3 men after a gang made off with a Royal Mail van on Tyne today. The van was recovered and 1 man arrested following a dramatic chase through a residential street in Gateshead.
It's believed the parcel force van was taken in Newcastle and driven to Gateshead. Details are sketchy, but it's thought the gang may have struck while a delivery was being made. Police were called to Woodbine Terrace off Coatsworth Road, where officers chased the suspect through several front gardens, scrambling over fences along the way. Police forced an entry into the basement of one of the houses nearby, and a man is now under arrest. He's being questioned by detectives at Gateshead Police Station. It's thought 4 men were involved in the raid, and several mail bags have been stolen from the van. So far, they haven't been recovered.
Sid Longstaff, who runs the animal sanctuary at Throckley in Newcastle, is to appear in court accused of indecently assaulting 2 young girls 18 years ago. Mr. Longstaff, who's 51, is expected to strenuously deny the accusations when he appears before Newcastle magistrates on September the 22nd. Social deprivation and inequality in Newcastle are highlighted in a new report from the City Council, compiled from 1991 census data. City Profile shows a large rise in the number of one-parent families and growing numbers of children with jobless parents. A man's been arrested following a crash at Whitburn in South Shields in which a 20-year-old driver was killed. Police say the man is being questioned after being traced to his home in Sunderland. Speckles, the cuckoo flown out to Nairobi on a British Airways jet, has settled in at her new home. Speckles was unable to migrate under her own steam because she'd lost some vital feathers to a predator.
A major new shopping and food complex is to be built on the Hartlepool Marina. The £6 million development will include the first purpose-built designer factory shops in Britain. They're due to open in a year's time alongside tourist attractions that are aiming eventually to pull in more than 1 million visitors a year. The news follows yesterday's announcement that a £100 million energy research park is to be built at Stockton. And it's one of a series of multi-million-pound developments for Teesside being announced over the next week.
Teesside Development Corporation says the foundations have now been laid for commercial investors to transform this part of the old docks. The complex will incorporate 24 factory shopping outlets, 2 restaurants and a food court, totalling 650 seats. It'll be built next to the Imperial War Museum's proposed northern branch and the Maritime Heritage Centre, including an 18th century dockside village and featuring the HMS Trincomalee, which is Britain's oldest warship still afloat.
Within a year's time, I expect to see the restaurants, the shops, the wider shopping facilities, the new pubs, all opened, all trading, together with the Maritime Heritage Centre and the new museum for Hartlepool. All of those will be complete by September next year. Nobody has built designer factory shops on a new build basis anywhere in the UK, and this is the first time it's happened. And also it's been combined with a series of restaurants of differing sizes, so combining the two together, it is genuinely a unique £6 million project.
We're talking about factory shops. It's a different kind of retailing to retailing that you might understand from a retail park or indeed from a shopping mall. Essentially it's designer goods that are being sold as an end-of-range facility.
Can you reveal any names at this stage?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to. We're in discussion with a number of people, household names in terms of the branded goods that we're talking about. But I can tell you that the outlets are oversubscribed in terms of the people who want to rent them.
The work taking place includes a new road network and bridge linking the centre of Hartlepool with the marina. The Imperial War Museum plans to build a £10 million attraction incorporating much of the nation's 20th century naval heritage.
Miners and their managers have been partly blamed for a pit accident in Cleveland last week in which 4 colleagues were badly injured. Hundreds of tons of rubble and clay trapped several miners deep underground after a roof fall at Bowlby Potash Mine. Although geological problems were to blame, a report out today claims some workers ignored danger warnings.
It's exactly a week ago since 3 miners became entombed 30,000 feet underground along a 4-mile shaft at the potash mine. Several men, including rescue workers, were injured as they tried to dig them out. An initial investigation showed that the roof fall was due to geological problems. However, a final report says human error was also to blame. It says geological tests had warned that the potash seam being worked was becoming too thin for normal operations, and that the roof could collapse if mining wasn't scaled down. Those warnings were ignored for too long. Both miners and managers broke safety guidelines set by the company. But the man who was rescued after spending 9 hours trapped underground says the problem couldn't have been foreseen.
We're all learning. We learn all the time. And our safety crew are as good as anybody about learning from things like that. We have safety talks every week. There's a guy lying in hospital in Middlesbrough at the moment, used to be our safety man. He worked as well as anybody for getting safety improved. I can't see that.
So as far as you're concerned, you weren't aware that there could be a problem?
If you see the thing in its context, I think it's quite unique what's happened, and we'll learn from that. You know, this is a learning process.
There was no one from Bulby Mine available for interview. However, in a statement, the company accepts that human error was partly to blame and says that everyone has now learnt their lesson.
There is no question of that. The collapse was totally preventable.
What recommendations will you be making to the management and personnel of the mine?
I have already met the manager, owner of the mine, and my main recommendation is quite simply that his own rules are enforced. I have no doubt that if the rules as he specifies had been carried out, then this accident could have been prevented. Secondary to that is to ensure that the people at the mine are aware of his rules, and that is really a training education exercise that will also be carried out.
Last week, concern had been expressed about the use of roof bolting at Bulby, following recent accidents at coal mines in Nottinghamshire and at Ellington in Northumberland. The report says the system wasn't to blame in any way for this particular accident.
Andrew Friend reporting, and that's just about it for part 1.
But join us after the break for news of an auction of costumes from Castle Howard in North Yorkshire.
And that's not the only thing going under the hammer. We're going to be asking you how much you'd be willing to pay for Gazza's old boxer shorts. Don't say half a nickel. We're going to have them here in the studio with a stand-up comic called Ben Cawthon. There's a story behind these boxer shorts. Join us in part 2. Welcome back. Now, as the setting for the television serialisation of Brideshead Revisited, Castle Howard in North Yorkshire became one of the best-known stately homes in the country.
But it, like many others, has suffered hard times, and now its famous costume gallery is being shut down because of financial difficulties. Alan Hardwick reports.
Like Castle Howard itself, the costume collection gives visitors a glimpse of style and elegance spanning centuries of gracious living. In its 25 years, the collection has grown into one of the most important of its kind. There are something like 18,000 items, so many they can't all be displayed at once. But according to the Honourable Simon Howard, the cost of maintenance proved too great to sustain. The estate manager explained it was a case of priorities.
The problem is that when you're maintaining a house like Castle Howard and showing that to the public, you have to focus on the main purpose of people coming here, which is, of course, the house and the grounds. And the ancillary attractions are things which we have been building up over time. The costume gallery originally was the major ancillary attraction. Now we can't afford to maintain this size and cost of ancillary attraction as part of that visit. We have been in touch over this period with a number of the major museums, galleries and collections to see their interest in the costumes. And it's likely that the main costumes will go to those galleries in due course. But if they're not in a position to purchase them at this present time, that's likely to be done through one of the auction houses.
Some of the exhibits are on loan. The owners are being contacted at the moment. And a small selection of costumes belonging to the Howards as well as some of the more important historical items, will be kept at the stately home for display sometime in the future.
A Catholic nursing order which plays a vital part in looking after psychiatric patients is celebrating its 50th birthday this week. The Order of St Camillus cares for around 20 patients at a home in Hexham in Northumberland. It's the only project of its kind in the country, run as a partnership between the Order, the Health Authority and the local community.
St Camillus was a 16th century mercenary who decided to dedicate his life to looking after the sick after he was injured in a battle. The Order of St Camillus has rehabilitation units all over the world, but there's only one such project in England. The Camillians came to Tyneside in 1943. First they moved into a house in Brighton Grove, Newcastle, then to Swinburne Castle in Northumberland, before settling at East Park in Hexham in 1949. They've been here ever since. This building was a convalescent home until recent years, when a new project called Innisfree was started to look after people with long-term mental health problems. It's staffed by 22 nurses, brothers and priests, and their ministry is to the sick, following the example of St Camillus.
Most people who live at Innisfree were living in a large psychiatric hospital locally. As part of the retraction for that hospital, there were facilities needed for people from the Tyne Valley area, hence the existence of Innisfree. So people are usually referred from a large hospital. Having said that, we have had people move in who've lived in the community but haven't lived very successfully and need some work to get them back out there again.
There are 17 patients or residents here. Many stay for 2 or 3 years before moving back into the community, but only when they're ready. Richard has lived here for 2 years and eventually wants to move into his own flat, but for the time being, he's happy at Innisfree.
Just do what you like. I watch my television, do a lot of reading. It's relaxed here, nobody pushes you. Staff around, you want any help, any questions, you want to ask them, you know.
This week's celebrations are being witnessed by a special visitor from the Order in Ireland. Father Dennis Sandham says he's been impressed by the links between the project and the local community.
Well, this I think is the most encouraging aspect of our presence here in Hexham, you know, this great collaboration between lay people and Camillians. And I would imagine that this is the way forward, and it's very much a feature of the policy of the Order worldwide, that the charism of St Camillus will be communicated to those who care for the sick alongside Camillians.
It's difficult to imagine a more peaceful setting for a halfway house, with Innisfree in the heart of beautiful countryside. Staff say there's lots of activities available for residents and that it's a good example of care in the community. They say that means the light of St Camillus still shines at Hexham 50 years on.
Football next, and the news tonight is that 2 former Sunderland managers have got themselves new jobs and they're together again. Dennis Smith, the man who took Sunderland out of the 3rd Division and up into the 1st following the Laurie McMenemy disaster, is the new boss at Oxford United. His assistant will be Malcolm Crosby, who actually replaced him at Roker when Smith was sacked late in 1991. Both have been out of football management since Smith parted company with Bristol City last season, and Crosby, of course, was sacked from Roker Park earlier this year. They'll be officially named as the men to replace Brian Horton at Oxford at a news conference in the morning. Meanwhile, Middlesbrough's runaway start to the season has given them a chance of an early trip into Europe. Lenny Lawrence's team swept aside Barnsley in the qualifying round of the Anglo-Italian Cup. And there was more for the club to celebrate today in Dublin.
2 weeks ago, the Borough crushed Barnsley on Yorkshire territory in a Division 1 league match. Last night at Ayresome Park, the margin was again 3 goals. The first came from John Hendry, a great chip for his 7th goal in 6 games this season. Middlesbrough dominated the first half, and after the break, it was again one-way traffic. When Jamie Pollock's shot was blocked, Hendry picked up the rebound, waltzed round the defender and laid it on a plate for Paul Wilkinson. More to celebrate for the Borough fans. 2-0 now, and the Borough with one eye on possibly qualifying for the Italian stages of the competition. That would need Barnsley to beat Grimsby in a low-scoring match next week. The Borough's third came when Darren Sheridan impeded Craig Hignett in the box. It was a penalty, and Wilkinson scored easily from the spot to give Teesside's faithful the possible chance to sample football Italian style. And there were celebrations for another Borough player today. Alan Kernigan was in action for the Republic of Ireland in their World Cup qualifying win against Lithuania in Dublin. He made his mark by scoring the Republic's second clinching goal, a brave header at the far post after a cross from Dennis Irwin.
Now, I think it's fair to say we give our weatherman Bob Johnson quite a lot of stick on this programme, not all of it deserved. He does occasionally get the forecast right, and today was a case in point. He said it was going to be rotten, and by Jove, it was rotten. Didn't save him from a good soaking, though.
Well, we've come out into the miserable murk of Newcastle here to test the pine cone theory. Last night I had it in the studio, it was really opened out. Today I'm glad to say, in the rain and the drizzle and the wind, it's closing up nicely. So, Mr. Foggett, down there in Thirsk, you're onto a winner. However, the weather isn't onto a winner. I suppose the next question is, when is this rain going to stop? Well, there's a fair bit to come this evening. In fact, there's some heavy bits down to the south of us, which are giving us some thunderstorms. Now, that is a risk, I think, particularly over in the Pennine areas towards the west, but it's a fairly dull and cool evening everywhere. Showers going on through the night, no problem with the temperatures. Up in the Dales, down in the Vales, it's going to be above about 10, 12 Celsius. Tomorrow then, rather cloudy near the coast there, certainly to begin with. Still some showers coming along, and once again, they're going to be on the heavy side. But the difference from today, it's going to be much brighter day. I think most of us will see some sunshine tomorrow, but do look out for those showers. Very cool again on the coast in those easterly winds. 13, 14 at New Biggin, best Prideaux, Hexham up to about 18. The outlook for Friday then, it's much the same. A mixture of sunshine and showers.
Now let's take a look at tonight's news headlines by joining Nina Nurka in the newsroom.
Thank you, Leslie. The Prime Minister has hinted at welfare cuts. He said social expenditure was running 3% ahead of inflation, and we cannot spend what we couldn't earn. Police investigating a social security fraud have arrested 8 people in Sunderland area. It's alleged stolen benefit books were used to obtain £7,000. A report into the pit accident at the Bulby Potash mine in Clevedon claims some miners ignored danger warnings. 4 men were badly injured when the roof collapsed last week. And a Japanese expert on dinosaur noises has attacked the sound effects in the film Jurassic Park. Well, that's it from the newsroom. Now back to the studio.
Thanks, Nina. Well, finally tonight, I'd like you to cast an eye over this exhibit here. As you can probably see, it's a pair of boxer shorts, but these are no ordinary boxer shorts. They once belonged to football megastar Gazza. And tomorrow night, they're up for auction, along with other items in aid of the Swan Hunter Appeal Fund. And the temporary custodian of these boxer shorts is Ben Cortham. Now, Ben, tell us, there's a story behind how you got hold of these, isn't there?
Yeah, a few years ago I was doing a comic relief gig and Gazza was in the audience and we wanted something to auction, and I tried to get his credit card, but he wasn't going to have any of that. So I said, well, give us your underpants, and he did.
Just like that?
Yeah, he took them off and he signed them. Unfortunately, it was a student gig, and you know, students are very sort of like, they watch their money, they spend it on essentials like sort of beer and sort of you know, sort of fish fingers and that. They only gave us £18. They bought it, they gave them to me back, and I had them in my pocket, and I took them home, and then they got lost in the house.
They look a bit grubby, if I may say so.
Yes, that's because they've been in my attic. It's not the way Paul gave them, you know.
And you spent about 4 days looking for these?
Yes, we did. We've given them from the comedy festival to Swans so that they can auction them for the appeal fund. And I think if anybody who bought them, what we want is we want some businessman who's got loads of money to give us an absolutely obscene amount of money for them, so we can keep these great relic on Tyneside.
How much do you think they're going to fetch? Come on.
I've got no idea. If they give us something like £50 billion, they could have the yard as well, you see.
I believe you've even had bids from Italy for them.
Yes, from Lazio.
Right.
They've been on the phone. There's been a lot of female interest in them. I don't know why. But I think if anybody bought them, you find out a lot about the great man in these. For instance, you can find out that he actually washes his colours and his whites together.
I think we should get a woman's point of view on this. Leslie, I mean, what do you think of these boxer shorts?
Well, they don't exactly ooze sex appeal, do they, Stuart? Although I suppose it would depend who was wearing them.
You sound as if you've rehearsed that. There are no flies on this girl here. Right, so Ben, let's just recap. Tomorrow is the auction.
Yes.
Where and when?
It's down at the quayside at the... oh, I've forgotten where it is now.
It's the Guildhall.
The Guildhall, yes, that's right. Thank you very much. It's the Guildhall, and it's at 6:30, and there's lots of things that are going to be auctioned.
Well, let's hope they fetch a good price.
Yes.
Best of luck tomorrow, and that's it from us. See you tomorrow night. Good night.
Good night.